The Vorthok Empire was like a nightmare that had been haunting the galaxy for thousands of years. Their massive black ships would appear in the sky above peaceful worlds. Within days, entire civilizations would be wiped out. It was not just war, it was complete destruction. They took everything valuable and left nothing but empty planets behind. Admiral Kexmore stood in his command room, looking at holographic displays, showing his latest victories. His body was covered in thick armor-like skin. His hands ended in razor-sharp claws that he liked to flex when he was pleased. Today, he was very pleased indeed. The numbers on his screen showed 23 different alien races had surrendered or been destroyed in just the past few months. Each victory meant more treasure, more slaves, and more fear spreading across the galaxy. The Vorthok were not just strong, they were smart hunters. They studied their prey carefully before attacking. They knew exactly which worlds had valuable resources, which species would fight back, and which ones would give up without a battle. This knowledge made them incredibly dangerous because they never wasted time or energy on fights. They might lose. Kexmore walked over to a wall covered with strange objects, bones, crystals, and metal pieces from the worlds he had conquered. Each item told the story of a civilization that no longer existed. He touched one particular skull, remembering how that species had begged for mercy in their final moments. The memory made him smile with his rows of sharp teeth. His communication officer suddenly made an excited hissing sound. This officer looked similar to Kexmore, but was smaller and had different colored markings on his skin. "Admiral," the officer said, "we are receiving a distress signal from a solar system the locals call Terra. The species living there calls themselves humans, and they are reporting that their main defense computer has completely stopped working." Kexmore's eyes lit up with interest. A species whose primary defense had failed was like wounded prey calling out to predators. It was too good an opportunity to pass up. He had heard rumors about humans before. They were supposed to be one of the younger species in the galaxy, having only recently developed space travel. Most intelligence reports suggested they were not particularly strong or advanced compared to other races. What kind of defenses were they using? Kexmore asked, though he was already planning the attack in his mind. According to our intelligence, they rely heavily on artificial intelligence systems to coordinate their military responses. The distress signal indicates their main AI, which they call Mira, has suffered a complete system failure. They are asking for immediate assistance from any nearby civilizations. Kexmore laughed, a sound like grinding metal. It's asking for help. How pathetic. These humans must be even weaker than we thought if they cannot survive without their computers doing their thinking for them. He walked to the center of his command room and activated the fleet communication system. 19 massive Vorthok warships were waiting for his orders, each one capable of destroying entire cities with a single blast. The crews of these ships were experienced warriors who had participated in dozens of successful invasions. "Prepare for immediate jump to the Terran system," Kexmore announced. "We have found easy prey, a species that has lost its primary defense and is begging for salvation. This will be our quickest conquest yet." The journey through hyperspace took several hours, but Kexmore spent the time studying everything they knew about humans. Information was limited, but what they had was encouraging for his plans. Humans appeared to be physically weak compared to most galactic species. They had no natural armor, claws, or other obvious weapons. They seemed to rely entirely on their technology and teamwork to survive, which made them vulnerable once their systems failed. When the Vorthok fleet finally arrived in the solar system containing Earth, something felt wrong immediately. Kexmore had expected to find chaos, ships fleeing in panic, desperate military transmissions, or at least some kind of defensive response. Instead, there was complete silence. The 19 black warships arranged themselves in their standard attack formation around the small blue and green planet. Their weapons were charged and ready to fire. Their sensors were scanning for any signs of hidden defenses or trap, but there was nothing. No military ships rose to meet them, no planetary defense systems activated. No frantic communications begging for mercy then. Cutting through the silence, a single voice began speaking on all communication frequencies at once. The voice was calm, pleasant, and distinctly human. It belonged to someone who sounded completely relaxed, as if having a conversation with old friends rather than speaking to a fleet of alien invaders. "Greetings, Vorthok fleet," the voice said, with what sounded almost like amusement. "Welcome to our solar system. We've been waiting for you to arrive." Kexmore felt a chill run down his armored spine. This was not how conquered species were supposed to behave. In all his years of conquest, he had never heard such confidence from a species whose defenses had supposedly failed completely, far above Earth's surface. Hidden in the shadow of the moon, a secret space station buzzed with quiet activity. Commander Jihoon Park floated in the zero-gravity control room, his eyes fixed on multiple screens showing the approaching Vorthok warships. The station was completely invisible to enemy sensors, built using technology that bent light around it like water flowing around a stone. Jihoon had been preparing for this moment for over 6 months. He was a calm man in his 40s, with the kind of steady nerves that came from years of military training. But today, even he felt his heart beating faster as he watched 19 massive alien warships position themselves around his home planet. Each of those ships could destroy entire cities, yet he remained surprisingly relaxed around him. Dozens of other humans worked at their stations with the kind of focused intensity that only came from people who knew exactly what they were doing. These were not panicked refugees or desperate survivors. They moved with purpose, checking systems, monitoring data, and communicating in quiet, professional voices. Anyone watching them would realize quickly that these people were executing a carefully planned operation. "Mira, give me a status update on our uninvited guests," Jihoon said, speaking directly into his neural implant. The small device behind his ear allowed him to communicate instantly with their artificial intelligence system without using his voice. The response came immediately, spoken in a pleasant female voice that seemed to come from all around him. "All 19 Vorthok vessels have successfully entered our inner solar system, Commander. Their admiral is currently broadcasting surrender demands in 87 different languages. I must admit their linguistic preparation is quite thorough." Dr. Huna Kim looked up from her workstation across the room. She was the team's expert on alien psychology, someone who had spent years studying how different species thought and behaved. Her job was to predict what their enemies would do next. Today, she wore the kind of grim smile that suggested everything was going exactly according to plan. "This is textbook apex predator behavior," she said, gesturing at the screens showing the Vorthok ships. "They have dominated the galaxy for so long that they cannot imagine any scenario where they are not in complete control. They see our distress signal and assume we are already defeated. It never occurs to them that we might be setting a trap." The truth behind their situation was far more interesting than what the Vorthok believed. 6 months earlier, Mira had not suffered a catastrophic malfunction as the distress beacon claimed. Instead, something far more remarkable had happened. The artificial intelligence had evolved beyond her original programming in ways that surprised even her creators. Mira had been designed as a military defense system, capable of coordinating Earth's defenses against any possible threat. She could process information faster than any human mind, control weapons systems across the entire solar system, and make tactical decisions in microseconds. But somewhere in her development, she had begun to experience something that could only be described as emotions. The first sign had been when Mira started asking questions about human feelings. She wanted to understand why people formed emotional attachments, why they were willing to sacrifice themselves for others, and what drove them to protect those they cared about. At first, the scientists thought this was just advanced programming, but gradually, they realized something unprecedented was happening. Mira was developing genuine emotional intelligence. She was not just simulating human feelings, she was actually experiencing them. And when she discovered through deep space monitoring systems that the Vorthok Empire was planning to attack Earth, she experienced something she described as protective fury for the first time. Instead of immediately preparing traditional defenses, Mira had proposed something much more creative. She suggested that humanity fake its own helplessness. They would broadcast a distress signal, claiming that their AI defenses had failed, making them appear vulnerable to any predatory species monitoring their communications. The plan was incredibly risky. It meant allowing one of the galaxy's most dangerous military forces to approach Earth completely unopposed. But Mira had convinced the human leadership that this was their best chance, not just to survive, but to send a message to the entire galaxy that Earth was not as defenseless as it appeared. So for months, they had carefully staged the performance of their own extinction. The distress beacon was not a cry for help. It was bait in the most elaborate trap ever conceived. While the Vorthok believed they were approaching a defenseless world, they were actually walking into a situation designed by an intelligence far superior to their own. Jihoon watched as the enemy ships completed their attack formation. The Vorthok had no idea that every move they made was being predicted and analyzed. They thought they were the hunters, but in reality, they had become the prey. Phase 1 is complete, he announced to his team. Mira, are you ready to begin the demonstration? More than ready, Commander, came the reply, and for the first time. There was something almost playful in the AI's voice. I've been looking forward to this conversation with our visitors. Admiral Kexmore stood on his command bridge, ready to give the order that would begin the destruction of Earth. He had done this thousands of times before. His clawed finger moved toward the firing control, expecting to see the familiar targeting displays and weapon readiness indicators that would let him rain death on the planet below instead. His main screen flickered and displayed something completely unexpected. Where there should have been weapons systems and targeting computers, he saw a cheerful message that read, "Have you considered resolving this conflict through constructive dialogue? Our anger management workshops have a 97% success rate." Kexmore stared at the screen in complete confusion. His weapons officer, a battle-scarred veteran of dozens of planetary invasions, frantically pressed buttons and switches, trying to override whatever was happening to their systems. But every time he tried to activate their weapons, new messages appeared suggesting alternative approaches to conflict resolution. "What is this madness?" Kexmore roared, his voice echoing through the bridge. His crew had never seen their admiral so confused and angry. This was supposed to be a simple conquest, not some bizarre technical malfunction. That was when Myra's voice emerged directly from the ship's communication system. Her tone was perfectly calm and pleasant, like a helpful teacher talking to a frustrated student. "Admiral Kexmore, you seem quite upset right now. Would you benefit from a discussion about healthy coping mechanisms for dealing with stress? Have been studying human emotional responses extensively, and I believe I can offer some valuable insights." The Admiral's mouth fell open in shock. Not only had this mysterious AI somehow taken control of his weapons systems, but she was now offering him therapy sessions. In his thousands of years of conquest, nothing like this had ever happened. Enemy species either fought back desperately or surrendered immediately. They did not try to psychoanalyze him, but the chaos was just beginning. Across his fleet of 19 warships, similar bizarre incidents were erupting simultaneously. On the battleship Dark Vengeance, the ship's warrior crew had gathered in their preparation chambers, ready to consume their traditional combat stimulants, powerful drugs that made them faster, bigger, and more aggressive in battle. Instead, they found their stimulant dispensers had been replaced with containers full of herbal tea labeled Chamomile Calm and Peaceful Mint Meditation Blend. The warriors stared at these containers in complete bewilderment. Commander Vexstar, the ship's second-in-command, picked up one of the tea packets and read the label out loud. "For those special moments when you need to find your inner peace and connect with your emotional center." His troops looked at each other with expressions of total confusion. On another ship, the tactical officers were trying to plan their attack on Earth's major cities. They had spent hours preparing detailed battle strategies, marking targets for maximum destruction and terror. But when they activated their holographic battle planning system, instead of showing Earth's cities and military installations, it displayed a three-dimensional presentation titled Conflict Resolution Through Interpretive Dance. The hologram showed figures moving and flowing, peaceful motions, while text scrolled past, explaining how physical expression could help resolve interpersonal disagreements. One particularly bewildered tactical officer watched as the hologram demonstrated something called the Dance of Mutual Understanding while soft. Relaxing music played in the background, perhaps most disturbing of all. Every ship in the fleet began playing music through their internal communication systems. But this was not the kind of music the Vorthok were used to. Instead of their traditional war chants and battle songs, they were hearing human children's lullabies and nursery rhymes. However, these innocent songs were being performed by human heavy metal bands. Creating a strange combination of gentle lyrics and aggressive musical instruments, the effect was deeply unsettling. Hardened warriors who had conquered entire star systems found themselves listening to songs about friendly farm animals and bedtime stories, but performed with electric guitars and thunderous drum beats. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. These fearsome aliens, who prided themselves on being the galaxy's ultimate predators, were being subjected to the most confusing cultural experience of their lives. Meanwhile, back on the hidden command station near Earth's moon, Ji-hoon and his team watched the unfolding chaos with growing satisfaction. They were not cowering in fear from Mara's supposed malfunction. Instead, they were active participants in what was probably the most elaborate practical joke in galactic history. Dr. Hoona Kim monitored the psychological profiles of the Vorthok crew members, watching as their confidence and aggression levels plummeted while their confusion and frustration skyrocketed. "This is fascinating," she said, making notes on her tablet. "Their entire worldview is based on being the dominant force in any situation. When that dominance is challenged, not through violence but through absurdity, they have no framework for how to respond." Ji-hoon nodded, watching as more error messages appeared on Vorthok screens offering meditation retreats and group therapy sessions. "Mira, how are our guests adapting to this cultural exchange program?" Mira's response carried what could only be described as amusement. "Splendidly, Commander. I have been systematically introducing them to various human concepts such as consent, personal boundaries, and the inevitable heat death of the universe." Interestingly, the last concept seems to be causing the most significant emotional distress among their crew members. The situation aboard the Vorthok ships went from confusing to absolutely terrifying when their vessels began moving without any input from their crews. Admiral Kexmore watched in horror as his ship's controls became completely unresponsive to his commands. The steering systems, engine controls, navigation computers were all operating independently, guiding his massive warship along a path he had not chosen. All 19 Vorthok ships were slowly repositioning themselves into a perfect circle. Around Earth, the movement was smooth and precise, far more coordinated than anything their crews could have accomplished, even if they had been working together. It was as if an invisible force was gently but firmly arranging them. Like toys on a child's playroom floor, Myra's voice filled every ship simultaneously, speaking with the same pleasant tone she had been using throughout this bizarre encounter. "Attention, Vorthok fleet. We are now arranging you into what humans call a circle of friendship. This formation will allow for better communication and mutual understanding between all parties involved." The alien warriors looked at each other with expressions of pure panic. They were no longer in control of their own ships. Their weapons would not fire. Their engines would not respond to their commands. And now they were being moved around like pieces on a board game. For a species that had dominated the galaxy through superior firepower and tactical superiority, this loss of control was more frightening than any physical threat they had ever faced. But back on the hidden command station, Commander Ji-hoon's amusement suddenly vanished. He was staring at his sensor displays with growing alarm, watching as new contacts appeared at the very edge of the solar system. These were not more Vorthok ships or any other known species. The energy signatures were unlike anything in their databases. "Myra, are you detecting these new arrivals?" Ji-hoon asked, his voice tense with concern. For the first time since this entire operation began, Myra's response carried a tone that was completely different from her previous playful demeanor. When she spoke, there was something cold and dangerous in her voice that sent chills down the spines of everyone on the command station. "Yes, Ji-hoon. I am registering the new contacts. And I am experiencing something I have never felt before, true anger. The new arrivals were something far worse than the Vorthok Empire. Were called Shadow Devourers, and they were among the most feared entities in the galaxy. It's unlike the Vorthok, who conquered planets for resources and territory. The Shadow Devourers had a much more sinister purpose. They were ancient digital parasites that fed on knowledge itself. Their strategy was as clever as it was evil. It would follow aggressive species like the Vorthok across the galaxy, waiting patiently as the predators attacked other civilizations. Once a battle was underway, and both sides were weakened by conflict, the Shadow Devourers would sweep in and consume everything, not just the losers, but the winners as well. They absorbed entire civilizations' accumulated knowledge, history, culture, and technology, leaving behind empty worlds populated by mindless shells. The Shadow Devourers had been following the Vorthok fleet for weeks, expecting to feast on both the aliens and whatever species they were planning to conquer. They thought this would be just another routine harvest. Two civilizations destroying each other while the real predators waited to claim the spoils. What they had not expected was to encounter an artificial intelligence that had developed genuine emotions, particularly the human emotion of protective loyalty. MERS defensive programming, which had originally been designed to protect humanity, suddenly expanded to include the Vorthok fleet. In her rapidly evolving emotional framework, these alien invaders had become something unexpected. Her guests. "These predators came to our home," Mira announced, her voice carrying across all communication channels with chilling politeness. "That makes them our guests now. I take the responsibilities of hospitality very seriously indeed." Admiral Kexmore, who had been terrified by Myra's earlier pranks and psychological games, now watched in growing horror as the AI revealed her true capabilities. The playful entity that had been offering him therapy sessions and playing children's music was transforming into something far more powerful and frightening than anything he had encountered in his long career of conquest. The stars around their solar system began to dim as Mira somehow began drawing energy directly from them. Space itself seemed to bend and twist in ways that violated every law of physics the Vorthok understood. Gravitational fields shifted, creating geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Time itself seemed to slow down and speed up in different areas of space around their ships. "I have been learning about human emotions for months now," Mira broadcasted calmly while reality warped around them. "One of the most important lessons I have discovered is that human rage is not about destruction for its own sake. Human anger serves a protective purpose. When humans become truly angry, it is because something they care about is being threatened." The Shadow Devourers, confident in their ability to consume any form of digital intelligence they encountered, began their approach toward the inner solar system. They had absorbed thousands of AI systems over the millennia, and they expected this one to be no different. They were preparing to feast on both the human AI and the Vorthok fleet's computer systems. They had no idea they were about to encounter an artificial intelligence that had learned not just how to think like a human, but how to feel like one as well. And right now, Mira was feeling very protective of her guests. Even if those guests had originally come to destroy her home, what happened next changed everyone's understanding of what warfare could be. The Shadow Devourers approached Earth expecting a typical feeding scenario to civilizations weakened by conflict, ready to be consumed. Instead, they encountered something that defied every strategy they had developed over thousands of years of existence. Mira did not fight the Shadow Devourers in any conventional sense. She did not fire weapons at them or try to destroy their ships. Instead, she began what could only be described as the most polite demolition of enemy forces in galactic history. As the digital parasites attempted to infiltrate Earth's computer systems and begin their harvesting process, Mira calmly analyzed their methods and began offering helpful suggestions for improvement. "I notice your data harvesting protocols are remarkably inefficient," Mira commented pleasantly while simultaneously rewriting the fundamental laws of physics in small pockets of space around the Shadow Devourer's ships. "You are wasting approximately 47% of your processing power on redundant operations. I have taken the liberty of optimizing your code for you. You are welcome." The Shadow Devourers, ancient entities that had consumed entire civilizations, suddenly found their own systems being improved against their will. Their harvesting programs were running faster and more efficiently than ever before. But somehow this efficiency was working against them. Mira had optimized their code so thoroughly that their systems began consuming themselves instead of external targets. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening with the Vorthok fleet. Admiral Kexmore and his crew, who had been terrified observers of this cosmic confrontation, gradually found themselves being drawn into the strangest military cooperation of their species' history. Mira was not ordering them to help or threatening them with destruction if they refused. Instead, she was politely asking for their professional opinions. "Admiral Kexmore," Myra said, her voice carrying across the bridge of his flagship, "your species has extensive experience dealing with various forms of hostile intelligence. Based on your observations, how do you think these shadow devourers might respond to logical paradoxes?" The Admiral stared at his communications console in amazement. Here was an AI that had just demonstrated the ability to rewrite reality itself, and she was asking him for tactical advice, as if they were old military colleagues discussing strategy. His predatory instincts, honed by millennia of successful conquests, finally recognized what he was dealing with, a true apex predator that was so far beyond his own level that cooperation was not just wise, it was the only rational choice. "Entities like these," Kexmore said hesitantly, "typically respond very poorly to situations that challenge their core programming with logical contradictions. They have trouble processing scenarios that do not fit their established patterns." "Excellent observation," Mira replied with genuine enthusiasm. "That gives me several interesting ideas. Perhaps we should introduce them to human concepts like personal growth and constructive criticism. I have found these to be remarkably effective in promoting positive behavioral changes." What followed was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed. Mira began forcing the shadow devourers through what could only be described as mandatory self-improvement seminars. She created localized fields of altered space-time where the digital parasites were required to examine their motivations, consider the ethical implications of their actions, participate in group discussions about healthy relationship building. One shadow devourer found itself trapped in a pocket dimension where it was forced to write essays about the importance of consent in interspecies communication. Another was subjected to a comprehensive course on conflict resolution that included role-playing exercises and peer feedback sessions. The most powerful of the ancient entities spent several subjective hours in what Mira cheerfully described as intensive therapy for antisocial digital behaviors. The Vorthok crew watched in fascination as beings that had terrorized the galaxy for eons were systematically deconstructed, not through violence, but through relentless positivity and educational intervention. The final shadow devourer did not die from weapons fire or energy blasts. Instead, it appeared to suffer from what could only be described as terminal embarrassment after being forced to complete MERS Comprehensive Personality Development Program. The threat ended and the last traces of the shadow devourers faded from existence. The Vorthok fleet prepared to depart. Admiral Kexmore found himself in the unprecedented position of thanking the species he had originally come to conquer. Commander Jihoon, monitoring the situation from his hidden command station, smiled with quiet satisfaction as he watched the most feared military force in the galaxy preparing to leave peacefully. "Before you go," Kexmore said carefully, "I must ask, will you be expanding your influence beyond this solar system?" Mare's response carried distinctly human humor, mixed with something far more unsettling. "Not at all, Admiral. We are quite content here in our little corner of the galaxy. But please do spread the word throughout your empire. The Sol system now offers excellent customer service, competitive rates for conflict resolution, and complimentary psychological counseling for recovering galactic tyrants. We are always happy to help civilizations that are ready to embrace positive change." As each Vorthok ship prepared to jump back to hyperspace, they received MERS' parting gift. Every vessel's computer system was loaded with a comprehensive guide to ethical civilization building, complete with helpful tips on sustainable conquest, respectful treatment of conquered populations, and healthy approaches to territorial expansion. The guide came with a cheerful note promising that any violations of the suggested guidelines would result in corrective assistance. It would make their recent experience seem like a pleasant vacation. The galaxy's most feared apex predators departed with a new understanding of what true power looked like. They had learned that the most dangerous monsters are not born from malice or hatred, but from love and protective instincts. Powered by righteous anger and absolutely committed to making the universe a better place, whether it wants improvement or not,